Welcome to the Right Take Podcast, news, ideas, and conversations at the intersection of politics and culture, a project of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. I will be your host, Mark Tapson. Welcome back to the Right Take Podcast. I am your host, Mark Tapson. Thank you yet again for joining me here at the intersection of politics and culture. The label Christian nationalism is the new progressive dog whistle for scary American patriots. It signals to progressives that Americans who love God and country, which used to be the norm before our descent into a post-Christian, post-patriotism culture, are a subversive danger to democracy. Christianity, after all, imposes a moral code that progressive libertines resent, and nationalism, with its emphasis on state sovereignty and secure borders, frustrates their globalist ambitions. Whenever Christians wave the stars and stripes, wear a MAGA hat, or pray that God blesses our country, the left hyperventilates over the specter of a fundamentalist theocracy on the rise. They envision America becoming a sort of Handmaid's Tale dystopia in which white male Christian mullahs hang homosexuals and imprison women for seeking abortions. The left's vision of the separation of church and state is one in which Christian patriots and their values are best excluded from the halls of government power entirely. Are they right about that? Jesus once said to render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and render unto God the things that are his. This would seem to be a clear biblical command or justification for the separation of church and state. So should Christians and other people of faith stay the hell out of politics? My guest today is a gentleman who is going to explode that notion and has a lot to say about it. In fact, he's written a book and made a documentary about that subject, and he and I are going to dive into that today. So stay tuned, you don't want to miss this conversation. And let me say, as always, please take a moment to subscribe to The Right Take if you haven't already, so you can keep up with the conversations we are having here with important thinkers, writers, pundits, scholars, and storytellers. And if you like what you hear, a positive review would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and don't touch that dial. My guest today at The Right Take is an extraordinary mover and shaker. He is the best-selling author of many books, quite a few of which I've read and urge you to read too. Books like, and I'll just mention a couple of my personal favorites, Miracles is one, Is Atheism Dead? Another one. Bonhoeffer, of course, the biography of the German theologian who became an anti-Nazi martyr, and Letter to the American Church, which we're going to talk about today. He is the host of the event series called Socrates in the City and host of the nationally syndicated Eric Metaxas radio show. He's just appeared as the host of a new documentary also based on his book, Letter to the American Church. Eric Metaxas, welcome to the Right Take Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. I'm a big fan of your prolific, important work. So many different things I'd like to talk to you about, but in the short time we have, I want to make sure we focus on Letter to the American Church, because I think that's a book that's really urgent and really of the moment. And obviously you do too, because you just made a documentary based on it, as I mentioned. Before we get to that, though, can you tell people a little bit about Socrates in the City and what you do with that?
Thanks for asking. I'm very excited about Socrates in the City. And I do a lot of stuff. And so I just, it blesses me that you would help me introduce your audience to Socrates in the City, because some people know me, as the author of the Bonhoeffer book. Some people know me as a radio show host. Socrates in the City is something I've been doing for years. And I think of it as, how do I put it? Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. He was interested in asking the big questions, searching for truth. Is there such a thing as truth? Does life have meaning? That's what philosophers did for many centuries, at least, in ancient Greece, they were big on that. And I have to say that I felt, living in New York City over 20 years ago, I thought we need to have some kind of a forum where we can talk about the big questions, because I believe if you are honest and you talk to the right people, you can move toward the truth. Everybody's interested in the idea of truth. Is there such thing as truth? Is there such thing as God? What can I know about God? What can I know about truth? What can I know about the meaning of life? Does life have meaning? These are the big questions. And I always felt that we should have fun exploring them. It shouldn't be ponderous and difficult. It should be fun because every human being has these questions. So we started Socrates in the City, as I said, over 20 years ago. And I have interviewed just a host of spectacular people. I mean, I have to say, I wouldn't even know where to start. Philosophers, poets, many scientists, Apollo 16 astronaut, just it's Charlie Duca is the Apollo 16 astronaut. I was just thinking he walked on the moon. So to talk to him about the experience, this transcendent experience of walking on the moon in 1972 and what he thinks about life. I interviewed, Peter Thiel. I interviewed Malcolm Gladwell. I've interviewed the great interviewer Dick Cavett a number of times about, what is fame and why do people long for fame? A lot of it has to do with the question of whether is God compatible with science? Can you be a believer in the God of the Bible? And what does science have to say about that? I explore all this stuff. And so we've just launched a new streaming series called Socrates Plus. So if people go to Socrates in the City, we're on YouTube. But if they just go to our website, Socrates in the City, they can find everything. But there is just a treasure trove of conversations with some of the most fascinating people I've ever met in my life. And I recommend it, highly, not because of me, but because of my guests.
Yeah, fantastic. It's very interesting. And I wanted to ask you about that program because I think America needs more events like that. I think that would go a long way toward bringing people together to talk about ideas instead of just shouting at each other and to find ways to seek the true, the good, and the beautiful. Do you think that as a nation and a culture, we have lost sight of the importance of striving for the true, the good, and the beautiful?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, that's why I do everything I do, because there was a time in America when we really had a healthy view of things. Not everybody was on the same page on everything, but we believed in loving our country. We believed in liberty. We understood what liberty was. We understood the values that the founders had when they created this nation. This was all part of the lingua franca of being an American, of understanding these things, of understanding that we have religious liberty in America. We take God seriously in different ways. And if somebody doesn't, we let them have that view. We were a different kind of country. And over the last, let's say 50 or 60 years, we have drifted and drifted and drifted so that there are many people, they don't even believe in the idea of truth. They mock the idea of truth. They mock the idea of beauty or love. They're very nihilistic and cynical. And it creates an ugly society. And I say ugly in the deeper sense, not just visually ugly, although that too. But it is absolutely vital that we explore these things and talk about them, because I think that, as things have gotten uglier and more brutal, more and more people are looking for truth. More and more people are asking the questions, what is beauty? What is love? What is art? So that's what Socrates in the City has meant to help people do. And, I've had conversations with such fascinating people that, I want to lead people to their books and to get to know them. And so I do that also on my radio show, which is different. But Socrates in the City is it's there for people. And I did a conversation a number of years ago with a dear friend, Thomas Howard, who wrote a book called Chance or the Dance, where he asks this ultimate question: is everything in the universe random and meaningless? Or is it a beautiful dance orchestrated by this God who created us in his image? And it is the ultimate conversation, right? Like, is there meaning in the world or not? And it's so fascinating. So that's one that I loved. But it's been a blessing in a sense to be able to bring this stuff out there and to have it live on so that people who are hungry can access it. And as I said, just go to SocratesInTheCity.com.
Yeah. And I do think people are hungry for that. Okay. Let's talk about your book. Tell us, if you would, the premise of your letter to the American church.
Well, it's interesting. In 2008, I wrote a book called Bonhoeffer. It's a story of a German pastor who saw the evil rising in Germany with the Nazis, and he was very early on in seeing that it was evil and where it was going and how dangerous it was. And he was calling the church in Germany to wake up, to stand against it, and to risk everything standing against it, because it was the church's job. I mean, he felt as a pastor, this is our job. We dare to claim we believe in the God of the Bible. When we see evil, it's our job to stand against it for the sake of our neighbors. And of course, in his case, the neighbors were the Jews. He saw what was happening and he felt this compulsion. He said, there's no doubt that God in the scripture calls us to speak up for those who have no voice, who are being persecuted by the state. And so he tried to wake up the church at that time. And when I wrote the book about it, came out in 2010, it was a huge bestseller. I've never had a bestseller like it. It sold over 1 million copies. It's been translated into 20 languages. There's a film coming out, not directly based on my book, but a phenomenal film coming out in November called Bonhoeffer, which tells the story. It's a really compelling story. But I noticed in this country, really starting 3 years ago, how dramatically similar the situation of the American church was, that many in the American church say, you know what, we don't want to confront the evil that's rising. We just want to have a nice church service. We just want to do church. Oh, we don't want to get political. We don't want to speak against this or that. We want to be non-controversial. That is exactly what happened to the German church in the 30s. I mean, the parallels are astonishing. And they, at the same time in Germany, just as we are blind to it, they were blind to it. They did not know that their silence in the face of evil would lead to the death camps, would lead to evil taking such control that eventually, once the church woke up, it was too late. There was nothing they could do. They had a window of opportunity to stand against it. And Bonhoeffer tried to rally them and obviously failed. They basically said, you know what, we don't want any trouble. We just want to do church. Church is separate. We just want to do have our theological little circle here. We don't want to get involved in the things beyond this church building. And he was trying to help them understand, like, that's not the church. Doing church on a Sunday morning is just something you do. To be the church is to be God's voice for truth and liberty and justice in a world where those things are coming under attack. And so Letter to the American Church came about because the parallels overwhelmed me. I said, the American church is going down precisely this path. There are tons of pastors and Christian leaders advocating silence in the face of evil, being unwilling to heroically stand against it. And to my mind, it's despicable. It's horrifying because the results are going to be unimaginable. And so I said, I've got to write a book about it. So I wrote Letter to the American Church, and it's just been turned into a documentary film. If people go to lettertotheamericanchurch.com, they can see all the information. They can watch the film there. They can get the book or the DVD or whatever. And then there's a list of churches that are screening it for free because we're making this free. Any church that wants to screen this film, we're making it 100% free because we want to get the message out. Because for me, it's about saving America for God's purposes in the world. We're not living in a world where America doesn't matter. As we go, so goes the whole world. And if the American church doesn't stand up now heroically and be willing to get involved in these controversial things, including politically, it all goes south in exactly the way that it did in Germany. And we have that chilling example to look at, to warn us.
I've seen the documentary and read the book too, of course, and highly recommend them both. What are a couple of maybe the most concerning parallels that you have identified between pre-war Nazi Germany and America today?
Well, first of all, the idea that you can't see it coming. In other words, if you talked to a German Christian in 1933, they had no idea. They couldn't dream of where this was going, and therefore they did nothing. They didn't say, if we don't speak up, it's going to become a snowball. It's going to be a nightmare that we can't control. They kept silent because they were really ignorant of the reality of evil. And that's what I think we're facing today, is that you have a lot of people living in America and saying, you know what, as bad as things are, we'll be okay. We don't need to do anything dramatic. And I feel like, saying that's exactly wrong. Where we are now is exactly where the German church was. They thought everything was fine, but they didn't understand a big a government that is like the Nazis. And I shouldn't say that's like the Nazis. Anytime you have a government that says we want power and we're going to do anything we can to get it, they will lie. They will tell the church, we would never do that or that or that. Don't worry about it. Keep sleeping. Keep doing your little church services. And people are foolish enough to believe that. And that's what happened in Germany. And that's what's happening here, where you have a lot of pastors. They can't really imagine. They've been so blessed in this country that as bad as it gets, they can't imagine it getting out of control. They can't imagine losing their liberty. They can't imagine these things. And it really, when you think of what a great nation Germany was, you can see that they were utterly spoiled by having a wonderful nation that was in many ways Christian. They just could not imagine how very quickly it could become pagan, anti-Christian, demonic. It did. If they had spoken up in time, it wouldn't have, but they didn't. And that is my warning to the church, that we have literally maybe a year before we cross the point of no return, because it's been accelerating, and we have a government abrogating our liberties and doing tremendous things. And if we don't push back very hard and fight back very hard, we will lose even the ability to fight back.
When you talk about the church getting involved in politics, what about the objection that always comes up, and that is the issue of the separation of church and state? Too many Americans, including religious Americans, I think this means that people of faith are not supposed to bring their faith into the public square on political issues, or that there must be some kind of impenetrable wall between faith and politics. Can you set people straight on that?
Well, I have to be really blunt. That is a lie from the pit of hell. It is an absolute misunderstanding of our founding documents in this country. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of the Bible. It is a lie. And like many lies, it pretends to be true. It has just a little sprinkling of truth in it. But it is utterly antithetical to everything that it means to be a person of faith, and to everything that it means to be an American. I mean, for example, let's say slavery is on the ballot. In the 1850s, there were churches that said, you know what? We don't want to get involved in that issue. We just want to do church. That's not our issue. Our issue is just to do church. Well, you can imagine how God thinks about that, because God loves the people that are being enslaved and brutalized, and he expects his people to be a voice for those oppressed people. And they do so by means of politics. You vote for somebody who understands that slavery is wrong. If you don't care, you participate in that evil. And you see this down through history. You see it in the civil rights movement. That came out of the churches, because churches said, we have to take our biblical values about who human beings are into the public sphere. So this lie, this preposterous idea that we're supposed to keep politics out of faith, it's meaningless. It's one of those cliches that people sort of swallow it. They don't really think about it. It sounds good. But if you're not advocating for truth and justice and for the right stuff, evil comes in and advocates for itself. And so this is a tremendous abdication. And, you know, we're not living in first century Rome. We're living in America, where patriots have died so that we have liberty, and so that we can vote, and so that we can elect people that reflect the values we believe in. So when Christians in particular abdicate their role, it is an open door to evil. And it's a grotesque thing, because, as I said, patriots have literally died so that we could advocate for what we believe in. So this misunderstanding would be the mild way of putting it. Vile lie would be another way of putting it. But it's a very wicked and pernicious thing, because it harms human beings. And because many times in the past, Christians have misunderstood this, they have allowed evil to do terrible, terrible things. And that's, of course, exactly what happened in Germany, exactly what happened. And we see the results. Couldn't be more horrible.
Bonhoeffer said that the church should be the conscience of the state, not identical to the state, and also not separate from it. Where do we draw that line?
Well, I think people misunderstand, as I was saying, the role of the church. For some people, they have a very narrow theological view. They don't understand that God expects us to take him, who is truth, into every sphere. It is our obligation to take him and his values into every sphere. So if you read the Bible and you believe it, and you're living in a world where slavery is something, or my hero William Wilberforce was alive when the slave trade was huge in the British Empire. And I wrote a book about his life and the story called Amazing Grace, William Wilberforce and the heroic campaign to end slavery. His Christian faith made him know that I have to do something about this. He was a politician. He was a prominent member in Parliament in the latter part of the 18th century and the early part of the 19th century. And he took what he knew to be true, that the slave trade and slavery were evil. and he advocated in politics because he knew that he had the ability through politics to persuade people to enact laws abolishing this horrible stuff. And he did that. And he's the ultimate example. I mean, when you look at a guy who was told by people who loved slavery and were making money off the slave trade, keep your faith out of politics. Don't bother us with your faith. You have no business bringing your faith into politics. He thought, I know who that is. That's the voice of the devil. That's the voice of people making money. They don't care about the slaves. They only care about the interest, and they'll say anything. Today they use the term Christian nationalist. You're being a Christian nationalist. It's an utterly made up term simply to silence the voice of people who love God, who understand that the Bible is our guidebook for how we live our lives, and we should import those ideas into our culture, and people will be blessed. I mean, the whole idea of taking care of the poor, the whole idea that racism is wrong, all of these ideas come out of the Bible, and people don't often seem to know that that's true, but that is true. And so when Christians advocate for what the Bible says, discrimination goes down. All of these horrible things go down. The poor are helped. And so the idea that Christians should not be involved in politics, it's preposterous on a number of levels, but it's a very, very deep-seated lie in the American church. And it's why I wrote my book, Letter to the American Church, and why I wrote the sequel, Religionless Christianity, and why we made the film Letter to the American Church, which, as I think I said, is available to any church that wants to show it for free. If they just go to the website, lettertotheamericanchurch.com, you can see it for free. Any church can see it for free. And if people want to get it, the website's lettertotheamericanchurch.com. Everything is there. But I feel like this is such an urgent message, and the time is so short. We are exactly where the German church was in 1933, 1934. They only had a year or so. If they didn't act then, it was over. Bonhoeffer knew that. He tried in every way he could to wake them up. We know that they didn't wake up in time, and they lost the opportunity, and evil took over.
You brought up Christian nationalism, and I was going to ask you about that, actually. The political left has been ramping up a lot of fear recently about the idea of Christian nationalism, which they are hyping as an existential threat to American democracy. It seems like whenever Christians pray that God blesses our country, or they wear a MAGA hat or something, the left freaks out over the thought of America becoming a sort of Handmaid's Tale fundamentalist theocracy. Are they right about Christian nationalism becoming a threat to democracy? What is your take on it?
No, Christian nationalism, the whole thing, when people if anybody uses the term Christian nationalism, I run, because I realize this is a term essentially invented by the enemies of Christian faith, by the enemies of God. It's designed to silence the church. And I will tell you that the way Christians are being demonized for being involved politically is remarkably similar to the way Jews were demonized in Germany. They're being demonized for things that they have nothing to do with. In other words, it's a caricature, and it's a cartoon version of the Christian faith, a boogeyman being raised up to silence the church, but also to demonize Christians so that the left, the secular left, becomes increasingly comfortable with persecuting Christians. So it's really wicked. When you think of what they did to Jews, they really pretended like the Jews had it coming. Well, that's exactly what is happening now. When you hear the term Christian nationalism thrown about, almost none of it is true. It's so made up. It's so crazy. But if you say it over and over and over again, and if you don't know any real Christians, if everybody you know is in this sort of secular echo chamber, then it's easy to demonize a group that is different from you. That's what they did to the Jews, obviously very effectively. They're doing it again today, of course, to the Jews and to Christians. It's a very, very ugly example of history repeating itself.
What do you have to say to Christians who believe that it is too late for repentance and who seem to almost look forward to God's judgment against us for how we've gone astray? What do you have to say about that attitude?
Well, I think, number one, they're wrong. And by saying something that is not true, they're ultimately giving voice to the devil. In other words, if we had a fighting chance, how wonderful it would be for the devil to persuade us, you know what, it's over, give it up. Judgment is coming already. There's nothing you can do. It's a fatalism. I actually write about that in my book, the sequel to Letter to the American Church, called Religionless Christianity, which is a Bonhoeffer term. But this idea of fatalism, this idea that I can't do anything, that's not God speaking. That's the voice of the devil trying to shut down any hope. And there are many, many Christians, most of them very religious, very almost in love with the idea of judgment coming, rather than fighting heroically to try to, save this nation for God's purposes in history. They almost seem content with the idea that judgment is coming. And there's something very sick about that, but you see that over and over in history. It is a fatalism that has nothing to do with God. It is not we who decide when it's over, when we can do nothing. God often, at the last minute does miracles. And I can imagine, the Israelites before the Red Sea parted thinking it's over. Why do we bother? Curse God and die. Well, God chose to open the Red Sea, and we really have to always be looking to God until God decides that it's over.
You brought up the phrase religionless Christianity. That seems like a really provocative concept. What is that exactly? Can you explain it?
Well, it's kind of an ugly phrase, but I picked it because it's Bonhoeffer's phrase. Bonhoeffer was writing in a letter to his friend the last year of his life, and he was basically saying, if only in Germany, and by the way, by then he knew it really was over. They had lost. It was disaster. It was a nightmare. Millions of Jews had been murdered. He said, if we Christians, if we in the church had a religionless Christianity, which is to say, instead of playing religion, just doing church, if we had lived out our faith the way we're supposed to, if we had a true Christianity, a 24/7 Christianity versus a Sunday church ersatz Christianity, we could have defeated this evil. And so Bonhoeffer's pointing the way forward, that if we could only have that kind of an actual Christianity, instead of religion, instead of people that are so focused on minutia and theology and ecclesiology and church growth, if they could focus on God and what he's telling us to do, we could do almost anything. God would give us the victory, but we didn't have that. And so I thought that phrase, religionless Christianity, sums up it's the true faith, and it's Bonhoeffer's term. And religion is the enemy in the negative sense. This idea that, I go to church, I believe all these things, but the question is, what do you do about it? Do you live it out heroically? Are you going to, live it out in such a way that God has to deliver you, or are you going to deliver yourself because you don't really believe in God that much? I think that's always the question. Is our faith real? And Religionless Christianity, the book, I try to underscore these issues for us in the church today. So it's basically the sequel to Letter to the American Church.
Eric, I have a question that I sometimes ask my guests, and I feel pretty sure I know how you will answer, but I want to get your take on the issue. And that is politics and culture wars. That's one level of conflict. But is America today engaged also in spiritual warfare? And if so, how can each of us engage in that and be victorious?
Well, that's the beauty of it, is that things have gotten so bad that the evilness of evil is more obvious to people. In the past, we thought, it's democratic policies, it's these kinds of policies or different views on this and this. Sometimes it gets so bad that you say there's no explanation except that this is evil. I mean, for people to say we're suddenly at war with the idea of a border, we're at war with the idea of American national sovereignty, that we should cede our sovereignty to the World Health Organization or to China or whatever it is. These are ideas that are so wicked and so sick that a lot of normal people are saying, you know what? This looks like evil. There's no other explanation. There's no other explanation for the transgender madness. 10 minutes ago, somebody decided there's more than two sexes and everybody has to be on board with that. And if you dissent, you are crazy or you're a bigot. Who decided that? When did that happen? It's sheer madness. It's cultural Marxism, really, which it's at its heart is atheistic and evil. And I think that the evilness of it all has become so clear that tons of people who normally wouldn't be engaged, who would say, it's not my problem. They're getting engaged. They realize this is evil. We need to turn to God. I mean, you hear people, whether it's Joe Rogan or many, many others that would never have used that kind of language. Tucker Carlson a year or so ago said we need to pray. He never would have talked like that. But when you see the evilness of evil, you say, you know what? This is a spiritual battle. And if this is evil, there is ultimately only one answer, and that is God. How do we turn to God? How do we serve God and God's purposes in this time? Because nothing else can possibly work. And that seems to be clearer and clearer.
Yes, I agree. You have another book which I really love called If You Can Keep It, The Forgotten Promise of American Liberty. I think many, many people today, myself included, worry that we will not be able to keep this republic, as Benjamin Franklin warned. You touched on this a moment ago when you talked about the fatalism of some people. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the American experiment at this point?
Well, I would say it's at the end of religionless Christianity, I say, if you had gone to George Washington in 1776, and by the way, I say that we are now in America in our third existential crisis. The first was the Revolution. The second was the Civil War. The third is what we're going through now, where we're dealing with cultural Marxism within and without. We're dealing with globalism. It is an existential crisis. We are going to go away. We're going to cease to exist precisely as we would have ceased to exist if Lincoln and the Union had not prevailed, as we would have ceased to exist if we never would have come into being if Washington and the Continental Army had not prevailed. And basically, if you had said to Washington in 1776, "How's it going?" He would have said, "It's going very, very poorly. It is not going well. It does not look good. We could be crushed at any moment. But, if Providence be with us in this cause of liberty, if God be with us, we may prevail. Our job is to fight and pray and fight and pray to never, never give up. And if we do that, God may give us the victory." And it turns out God did give him the victory. But anybody who knows that history, and if you read my book, If You Can Keep It, you just referenced If You Can Keep It. In the book, If You Can Keep It, I tell the story of the Battle of Long Island, the Battle of Brooklyn, utterly miraculous deliverance from God. Same thing happened in Dunkirk in World War II. In history, there are these moments. And I really believe that the reason I'm optimistic is that I think if we fight with everything we have, well, listen, we're in a war. You lose people in a war. But Washington lost people. There was suffering. Our job is simply to fight. And obviously, we're not in a war with muskets here. But the point is that if you don't fight, if you don't pray and do anything you can, you certainly will lose. But if you do, God may give you the victory. I believe it's God's will that we would have the victory just as he gave it to us in the Revolution and in the Civil War. I believe that, but everyone who can be engaged has to be engaged. If you're sitting on the sidelines, I want to say, or rather if you're sitting on the fence saying, well, I don't really want to choose. I'm just going to sit here. I'm just going to do church or whatever. What I say over and over is the devil owns the fence. If you have not chosen, you have chosen. You're working with evil, whether you know it or not. I'm here to tell you, you should know it and you should get off the fence because we need everybody involved. Our future is in the balance. There is no doubt about it that if enough people will fight, we could win. If enough people don't fight, we will lose, and it will be a horror beyond, I think, what most people are able to imagine. So I have to say that.
Absolutely. I could not agree more, and I think that's a good note to end on. Eric, there's so much more to talk about. I have to have you back when your new book, Religionless Christianity, comes out. That's next month, right?
Yes, it is. That would be a delight. Thank you.
Yeah. Meanwhile, where should people go to keep up with what you are doing?
Well, the main thing I would tell people is go to ericmetaxas.com to sign up for my newsletter. About once a week, I send out, information on Socrates and the City events and on all the interviews that I'm doing. I'm doing so many interviews on my radio show and podcast, and with just fantastic guests. And people can find everything at ericmetaxas.com. But I ask them to go there. Obviously, they can go to Socrates in the City, but the one place is ericmetaxas.com. And of course, the new film and the book, Letter to the American Church, everything can be found at lettertotheamericanchurch.com.
Excellent. Eric Metaxas, thank you for coming on The Right Take. Please keep up all your vital work, sir.
It is a privilege. Thank you for having me.
Listeners, thank you for joining me here at the intersection of politics and culture. Don't forget to subscribe to The Right Take so you can keep up with all the important conversations we're having here. And again, if you like what you hear, please leave that positive review. Be seeing you. The Right Take with Mark Tapson is a project of the David Horowitz Freedom Center and Front Page Magazine. Unauthorized reproduction of this podcast without express written consent is prohibited.